Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I just wanted to do a really quick intro to set the scene for this video. But first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for the love. For those who don't know, I managed to sneeze and injure myself, which wasn't great, but we're getting there slowly. It's going to take a while to recover properly, but I can get in my chair. So got to be grateful for that. But it has been tough. It's been painful, and yeah, forgot how bad it is to properly injure yourself. Anyway, obviously I missed last week, but I did say that I would post a virtual talk that I gave online. I was supposed to be there the weekend that I actually hurt myself. But I sent in a virtual talk, and I just thought, do you know what? This would be really interesting for people who haven't seen me at work, haven't seen what I do. So without further ado, this is me speaking about learning to be independent as somebody with brittle bones. And just to give you a little bit of context, this talk was for young people with the disability that I've got. So it was kind of like giving my top tips and tricks, as well as just kind of giving that emotional support as well. So I hope you enjoy, and yeah, let me know what you think, but don't give me like too much critique, because I'm not very well at the moment. I'm a bit vulnerable. I'm joking. Anyway, enjoy, and I will see you next week, hopefully, if I can get back into a little bit of a routine. See you then. Hi everyone, I'm Jem. I'm so sorry I can't be there this weekend. In true OI fashion, I sneezed. It's not funny, don't let me laugh. I sneezed and fractured my pelvis. But I know if anyone would understand that, you in the room will understand that. So I'm absolutely gutted I can't be there. More so because it's cocktail making tonight, and not gonna lie, I was looking forward to seeing people, but I was really looking forward to cocktail making, so please do have a few cocktails for me. But this talk was going to be all about independent living as someone with OI. So just to introduce myself a little bit, I have type 3 OI, and I'm now 32. So I've had a few years to build on my independence, and I think for me, independence is like one of the key topics that I like to talk about, because this is what I do now. I do content creation and talks just like this, and I just think with OI, you don't get it unless you've got OI about how hard it is to navigate independence. Like, it can be so overwhelming to think about the end goal and just think, where do I even start? It's too overwhelming, as well as having pain, or spontaneous fractures. You just think, how does one do it? So hopefully this little chat will kind of give you my experience of how I found it. I am on strong painkillers, so if this is I can't laugh. If this is not structured, well, it isn't, and I'm just gonna chat at you, and hopefully it will be helpful. But let's go to the beginning, where I, like most people, my parents had never heard of OI, and it was very much something that we all learnt together, and their motto really was, take each day as it comes, and as long as Jem's happy, that's all that matters. And I genuinely have taken that very seriously for myself as an adult as well. I've kind of always lived by that rule, and I do think that is something that not putting pressure on yourself to be exactly what you want to be straight away is the key, and it's about building up to it. Don't get me wrong though, I do think people with OI are very stubborn, and it's very easy to achieve something and then move on to the next thing. But one thing I would say is I've learnt to appreciate what I've achieved bit by bit, but only recently. That's taken a very long time. So for me, as someone who, couldn't walk, can't even stand, using a wheelchair was just kind of normal to me, and I know a lot of people in this room will feel the same. So in terms of independence, my chair was such a positive thing and still is, and I think embracing that as freedom is the first step to independence, and having the mindset of this is a tool that gets me from A to B rather than a negative thing. My parents always kind of put that onto me. But not being toxic positivity about it. Like, there are shit days and there are going to be times that, it's not great. Like when you've broken a bone, and I still held space for that. So I think it's getting that balance right of, accepting that being in a wheelchair is something that is just your normal, but it still can be shit when you hurt yourself. So when I was in school, independence wise, I had a carer pretty much 24/7, and although that worked well as a child, as I got older, I started to feel a little bit frustrated, and it actually started to get in the way of me making friends in school. Not making friends, actually, no. It was more like, when the girls want to chat, and it's probably about making bookmarks with your top 5. If you're my age, you might relate to that, I don't know. But you put names of boys in this top 5, and there were conversations that you just didn't want adults to be around. And I think what I started finding was that the more the adults were around, the less time I got with those friends that I wanted. So when I was about 14, I think, I started to say to my parents, I don't want my carers there all the time. And it was the number one problem that I felt like I had to say something, but I didn't know how to do it. And I didn't want my parents to say anything because I didn't want it to be a big deal. And I remember it being like something that I got really upset about, because making friends at school is like the biggest thing. Like, you've got not many problems, but friends were a big thing. So I decided to tell a teacher who was also disabled, which Joanna, this person as well, and he gave me some really good advice about, first of all, validating my experiences, that it's okay to feel like you want more independence, but then also offering advice that communicating is key. So that was the first time that I kind of spoke up for myself and said, please can I have some time to myself just to be with my friends? And it went down, people were shocked that I asked for it. People were nervous that I asked for it. What if I break? What if something happens? But ultimately they supported my decision, and I think that was the first time I learned that I knew my needs more than the experts, in quotes, like the occupational therapists and stuff like that. And that's not saying that, like, experts don't know things, but I think it made me realise that I need to ask them questions about stuff that they know, and then they need to ask me my opinion on what my personal interests are and what I want to do. So yeah, I'm really glad I did that. I spoke to the teachers, I said what I wanted, I started having time to, with my friends, and I'm so glad I did it. And I think from then on, that taught me that speaking up was something that I needed to do a lot. So when I got older, I went to college and experienced getting little things like getting a minibus to college rather than my parents taking me. So this was just another way to build that independence that was still safe and secure, but it meant that, not being with my parents 24/7, because let's be honest, no one wants to be with parents 24/7, even if you love them to death, which I do, but it can be so suffocating, and overwhelming, and you just, especially as someone who's quite stubborn and has my own thoughts and stuff, like, I wanted to be on my own. I wanted to be with my friends. Sometimes I just like to be in a room on my own. So I think being at college and being kind of getting towards like 17, 18, I started to realise that I do really want to keep practicing these things. So anyway, I would get the minibus, I would practice just going to like being dropped off at restaurants, spending time with my friends, and then coming home. And I didn't really do the whole nights out thing, but I just kind of practiced being dropped off somewhere and coming back. And that was a really good way to just test the waters. But I would say when I went to university in Leeds, that was when I was fully, confident being out and about. I was definitely doing it more. But there was this one kind of thing that I was like, how am I going to go to the toilet? Like, how am I going to be able to, be out and about for hours? And the bad thing is, and I know a lot of people will relate to this, I did hold on going to the toilet for hours, which is not good for your body. But we've all done it because we don't know if we can do it. We don't want to break trying to do it. So I'd say that was the biggest problem for me, was going to the toilet. And when you're at university, you're trying to do your studies, these like independent topics are kind of something that you keep to yourself. It can be, unless you really trust a friend, it's hard to share that side of stuff with people. So it was definitely something that I would work on myself and try and work out how to do stuff. Joanna, who's in the room, was luckily working at Leeds Uni when I was there and helped me with my accommodation. So I had a fully accessible for me bedroom and bathroom, which was incredible. And I think that really changed the game for just working out who I am and my independence. And it really did kind of turn a corner to how much I realised I can do when everything around me is set up. So I experienced for the first time a lower kitchen worktop, a lower oven. I was just like, oh my god, this is amazing. Because, I live with very tall family who we had a standard kitchen, and, I did random, cooking stuff from the dining room table. And although that was good, it wasn't really the experience of actually being in the kitchen and doing stuff. I think if I could go back now, I am really grateful for how I was brought up, and I don't think it was necessarily a bad thing, but I think now I would push more to have at least one part of the kitchen that's accessible. Just to be able to make a cup of tea and do little food things, because it's not just about having a cup of tea, which, if you know me, I love a cup of tea, but it's about the wider stuff of having your own autonomy to make decisions about when you want a cup of tea. What if you want a cup of tea at 1 o'clock in the morning? You need to be able to have that independence that's an adult choice, rather than having to ask, if you're able to anyway, rather than having to ask your parents all the time. So yeah, that's something that I've been thinking about recently, but obviously, in hindsight, and you don't know what you don't know. So, yeah, university was incredible. At this point, I couldn't drive. It was something that, because I was employing PAs and studying at university, I felt like my brain capacity could only tackle certain things. So I put that to the side for a bit, and I just thought, I'll just get my degree, I'll, employ my PAs, and then we'll go from there. Then I graduated the University of Leeds studying new media, which was incredible, and it definitely just kind of kick-started my career, because at that point I'd started my blog, and that's where, you know, the career that I've got now started. So if it wasn't for going to uni, I wouldn't know what I would want to be doing, so that's pretty cool. Got my first graduate job on campus, so I was still very much in it. I was in that environment that felt liberating and independent. But then it was about what am I going to do next when I'm living at home, because I wasn't near any train station. I couldn't get to anywhere if it wasn't my mum or my dad taking me, and I definitely plummeted mental health wise when I got back home, because I'd gone from so independent, can do what I want, I can roll myself to Leeds City Centre whenever I wanted. And it was a real shock when I got home. And then, you know, my mum would be like, on an evening, have you brushed your teeth? What time are you going to bed? Don't go to bed too late. As parents do. And I'd be like, oh my God, literally, I have lived by myself for 5 years. I can do this. So that was definitely a struggle. And combine that with COVID, nightmare, as it was for all of us. But luckily, just before COVID, I applied to get a car through Motability and started to learn to drive. And I think that was the best thing I could have done. And again, I understand why I didn't do it earlier, because I just couldn't put every big project into the same year or do everything at the same time. But I do wish I'd have done it earlier, just because it's such a life-changing thing. Luckily, I got the car before COVID, but I didn't pass my test before COVID, because obviously it takes a long time to get your hand controls. That was a huge thing, because independence-wise, I just wanted to get in the car and go. But what I realised was, driving for anybody is such a big thing. But when you're disabled, it's like times 10. And I hated admitting that, because I didn't want people feeling sorry for me. I didn't want anyone being like, oh yeah, it must be hard. But I had to admit that I had no idea how to do it. I didn't know how I should sit in the car, because I didn't know what the best position could be for me to drive. So it took me ages to work out what the best position was to be able to do it in a way that was safe for me. So when you're on the road, it's like figuring all this out at the same time and learning all the proper signs and doing the actual driving. So I would say learning to drive was the hardest thing I've ever done, but the best. And my tip for that is that a lot of internalised ableism came out then, because I started to think like, oh, I'm so disabled, which of course I am. And I really struggled when I wasn't doing it quite right. I thought, is it because I'm not strong enough, or is it because I don't have, you know, a strong enough stamina? Like, there was all these thoughts in my head, and I felt like if I would tell people how it's going, they would be like, yeah, of course. But oh my God, now I know that it's such a physical thing to drive, and I had to build, it was a physical task, and it still is a physical task to drive. But now I'm doing like 3.5 hours I did a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, it's thinking about giving yourself grace, basically, to learn and not to be perfect straight away, and to allow yourself to be disabled, because you are disabled. But obviously society tells us that, you know, being weak or being slow is wrong, and it's a load of rubbish. You've got to do it in your own time, and the best thing I would say is just practice, practice, practice. Whether that's driving, whether that's like doing a transfer for the first time, and also trying to put aside what people think about you. I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but when I've tried to do something for the first time, if somebody's there, I can't do it. It's like when you're trying to park a car and you've got people watching you. All the attention's on you. But as soon as, say, my mum and dad are not here, I'm in my own place. Oh, we're not there yet, but I've got my own place now. And yeah, let's say I try and, I don't know, fold a big bath towel on my own. Like, I can do it when no one's watching me because I have the freedom and the space to make mistakes, get it wrong, break a rib, like go through all these things. So that's something that I would definitely say. Don't be put off if it goes wrong the first time, even if you break for the first time, because I know that a lot of parents might say, don't do that again, you broke, but you know your own body and you know that, sometimes it's just an accident, like what happened to me this week. Sometimes you can't even control it, so it's about weighing up what's worth practicing and what's worth putting in the bin. So that's something that I would definitely say. And for the last part of this talk, I just wanted to talk about my biggest fear I had was, I don't know about other people in the room, but for me, the idea of breaking a bone with someone not present absolutely terrified me. I couldn't work out how it would work living on my own and not having that safety blanket of someone there if something was to go wrong. And even just thinking about how I felt was like, oh God. But I think that's because for me anyway, when I was younger, I really had quite traumatic breaks. Obviously there will be so much pain. When you're a child, you don't really know what's going on, if it just happens randomly. And obviously I would scream, cry, all hell would break loose, everything would move around me. I would suddenly be in A&E, and it was like the most traumatic experience. So I just thought, like, how is that going to work when I'm living on my own? Like, what's the protocol going to be? But I've got some good news. The first good news is, I don't know about anyone else, but I don't seem to remember those bad times as much anymore. I don't know if it's like your brain's mechanism that you just kind of put that to one side. Not in like an ignoring way, you just kind of think, well, yep, that happened. Usually, I remember the good bits of where Mum treated me to McDonald's after going to A&E. It's funny that, isn't it? But now I have my own place. It's amazing. It's a ground floor flat that's all adapted. But the main thing I would say is breaking a bone now looks a lot different to how it was when I was a child. I think now I'm 32, I know my body so well. I know when I'm feeling weak. I won't do silly stuff unless I've had a tequila, which I'm doing less now. But yeah, I won't do silly things. It's like, when you're a toddler and you like try and put your hand in a fire because you don't know that it's going to hurt you. Whereas now I'm like, right, I'm not going to do that thing because I know that hurt me last time. And then I would say, like, what happened to me this week is a really good example. So the way I did my pelvis this week was I sneezed. And you cannot control a sneeze. But when I sneezed, I was waiting for a train going to Manchester, and I sneezed and I felt this horrific pop in my hip. But I just went, ugh, like that. And then I thought, that feels not good. But because I was sat in my chair, I was on a platform going on a train, I was like, well, it's not excruciating, so I'm going to carry on. Silly, I know. But I had a train ticket, I was ready to go. So, did what I needed to do in Manchester, came back home. That's when I realised, when I got out of my chair, oh my God, this is not the usual little click. So, the kind of spanner in the works was that My mum and dad are currently on holiday, and I've never really been through like a big break before without them. My mum especially is still my primary caregiver, let's say. You know, she comes and helps me around the flat, helps me clean and stuff like that. So when that night when I got back and I was like, oh, this doesn't feel good, I was like, what do I do now? But then I was like, realistically, the only thing that they would do in that situation was, yeah, probably physically help me around the house, might make me a cup of tea or, you know, get me some food. But everything's set up for me anyway. I just needed pain relief in that moment. So the next morning when I realised it was like, OMG, I can't even get into my chair, I rang 111. They sent an ambulance round. The ambulance got the painkillers that I needed. And I've just thought, you know what? When I finally got the painkillers, and I was on a high, obviously, we've all been there. And I was just like, I did it. I did it on my own. I broke. It wasn't traumatic. I mean, don't get me wrong. I cried to the ambulance because I just thought, oh my God, as if I've just got an ambulance round. And it was scary that I was on my own. But I did it. And I rang my brother. I said, can you get this prescription? And he did. And he came round. And it wasn't a big deal. And yeah, I wanted to give myself, I can't reach, but if I could, I'd give myself a pat on the back because I thought that was a complete fear that I had in the past. And now I've done it. So that was a really long-winded way of saying, when you're younger, you can have so many really weird, and it's not weird, you can have so many random fears. You know, how am I going to go to the toilet? How am I going to break bones? How am I going to get myself food? And the answer is, you will probably figure it out. And that's not like toxic positivity. That's just us people with OI. We find a way, and we have to find a way. And once we've found it, it then becomes part of our routine. But I do think it's half finding a way yourself and doing it, but also your caregivers as well, allowing you to have that space to find it for yourself as well. So you really need to work together to make sure that for both of your own mental health sake, you've done dry runs, you've done it yourself, because, you know, we need to be able to know, all of us need to know that you're going to be okay and you can do it yourself. So that's my little story. I feel like as horrible as it is, as horrible as it is going through this, it's come at the right time because it's a good topic to talk about. And I would really encourage people today to think about what their fears are in terms of independence. Think about what stresses you out when you think about doing stuff on your own, and try and find a solution. Sometimes it might be like physical. So for me, I'm just going to like out myself because we're in a safe space. A big thing for me was hygiene. When I go to the toilet, how am I going to sort myself out? And after some research, I found a toilet wiper that I could use myself that folds up, and I now put it in my chair. So now I can literally just sort myself out when I go to the toilet. But that was such a huge thing for me to work out. So sometimes it might be physical like that, whereas other times it might be mental and emotional, and it might be having to have a conversation with your caregiver, with your parents or your grandparents, to say, I know you really care, but I really need to do this for myself, and I need to be able to try, make mistakes, let it go wrong to work out how to get it right. And that can be absolutely petrifying for caregivers, but luckily my parents were so understanding about this, and they really just let me go and let me try things out for myself. But they never kind of were bitter about it, and they never said, well, do it if you want, but don't come running back to me if you can't do it. I feel like that's not the way I would want them to react, because you'd feel guilty then, wouldn't you, if it went wrong, and you don't want people to judge you for trying. So I'm really grateful. There was only one time my dad said it was going to an Ed Sheeran concert in Roundy Park in Leeds, and it was all open sky, there was no roof or anything, and it was due to like thunderstorm. I'm talking like blankets of rain. And my dad was like, I don't think you should go because your chair's going to stop working. Our Jack, which is my brother, will end up pushing you. And it's dangerous, don't go. And I was like, you're being overprotective, I'm going to be fine. Let us live, Dad, let us live. Anyway, no, Ed Sheeran didn't even come out. It was the darkness as a support. 10 minutes in, it was absolutely throwing it down, and my chair came up with an error, and I was like, oh God. Anyway, I looked at Jack and I was like, if we stay, we're going to be in pitch black. My chair's already stopped, it won't move. And Jack were like, what do you want to do? And I said, I think you should push me out of the park and we'll have to get a taxi. So Jack had to push this humongous chair all by himself through a crowd of people, which by the way was very stressful, and I had to call for a taxi, and it cost £60 to get home, and we never saw Ed Sheeran in the end either. So yeah, but that was a mistake I wanted to make, and I did. So the moral of the story is, we all make mistakes, but try not to avoid them, because that's where you learn what you can and can't do. And once you find out what you can do, it's so liberating. I personally think the mistakes are worth it. Unless it's life or death, don't do it. But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Again, I'm sorry I can't be there. But I am online, so if you've got any questions... Oh, excuse me. If you've got any questions, just let me know, and I'll try and answer in between resting. But have a lovely rest of your weekend. Enjoy your cocktails, and thank you very much. Bye.